Here I am, in my room. In recent years, the Greek myth of Sisyphus, and specifically Albert Camus' modern reinterpretation of it, has permeated popular culture. It has defined a growing generation of red-pilled Sigma males and soft-hearted Tumblr users alike. And that's understandable. The story has an undeniable appeal, a universality, that no matter how hard the situation, no matter how many times the boulder runs you down, that there's a chance that you can still find satisfaction. You can still find happiness. We see echoes of this in the horrible modern misreadings of Marcus Aurelius. It seems like a pretty easy answer to Mark Fisher's looming question of capitalist realism. A way to still be happy in a system that perpetually rolls downhill. In fact, in the face of the world we're now living in, the existential crisis has become more than commonplace. The average person on the street is now carrying the baggage of Kierkegaard, Schopenhauer, Sartre, and Camus. How many millions of college students dedicate their entire personality to misreading a single quote by Nietzsche? We see it in the growing popularity of empty, hopeless films. Heck, Satan Tango is the 76th highest rated film on Letterboxd. That's not a healthy, happy, joyous world. I think it's fair to say that these fears are justified. Our planet may not sustain us much longer. Our system, our beliefs are crumbling. We exist in an empty pit of meaninglessness created by the void of postmodernity, the approaching nihilism Nietzsche tried so hard to subvert in all of his life's work. It's so bad that we long for earlier days, for the Renaissance, for the Dark Ages, or for Rome. Even if these periods were certainly much worse than the modern day, at least they knew how to be happy. At least they would, to co-opt a term, have a chance to escape the Matrix.
Toss the Turtle is a 2009 Newgrounds Flash game. For my generation, it was a staple of the you have time to play games in the computer lab, or you've managed to somehow take over the desktop computer at home. The game, created by Foracle and Gosman, is undeniably simple. You, either playing as the turtle or someone else controlling this whole thing, load a turtle into a cannon and shoot him into the air. It's a toss game, one of the most ubiquitous and simple Flash game formats there were at the time and are still to this day. With that being said, there's something undeniably special about this one. Toss the Turtle is not a kind game. It's a dreadfully cruel game. One in which the turtle slams against the ground, gasps for breath, bleeds out as he continues to fly. It's a game in which he's torn to shreds by chainsaws, exploded by bombs, and impaled on spike traps. Every flight for the turtle is one of the most frightening, painful, and hopeless experiences imaginable. Yet, after every flight, he sits down, takes a breath, and climbs into the cannon to do it again. From a mechanical perspective, this makes sense. This is needed for the toss game. In similar titles like Learning to Fly or Shopping Cart Hero, the player has to return to the ramp to once again launch off again. But it's different in Toss the Turtle, because the apocalyptic world it's created is not one you necessarily want to return to. It's made all the worse by Rage the Champions, the Castle Crasher borrowed track that plays over all of this. It's symphonic, triumphant, optimistic even. It's the thing the player, and by extension the turtle, needs to climb back in that cannon and do the whole thing over again, no matter how horrifying or painful it may be. It's a thing to push off your misgivings, to keep you pushing through when things are tough, when things are imaginable, when the darkness is too much. It's a lot like the original Dark Souls was released in 2011, and to this day it remains one of the most fundamental and perfect examples of a work of art in the medium of video games. There's really no point in talking about the story or the lore of Dark Souls, because there's a million videos that have already done that. But I think there is a lot of merit in looking at how it answers the problems and the questions of existence, the ontological questions. Existentialism is baked into the foundation of Dark Souls. It's prominent in its controls, in its lore, in its story. It's the driving factor behind the game's iconic difficulty. If you're interested in this idea, I recommend you go watch the video, the Gems Box video on the game's philosophy. But perhaps the most interesting part of Dark Souls is its answer to this problem, or rather, its non-answer. At the end of the game, you defeat Gwyn and likely become the next Lord of Cinder. If you do this, you're perpetuating the cycle, pushing the boulder back up the hill, but this will only last for a while. And as we see in the game's sequels, eventually, you will also be dethroned and replaced as mere kindling, castaway pieces of burn-up embers. The other option is to walk away, to embrace the darkness and see what would become of the world. Despite the parroting of Sisyphus, or it is what it is type of thinking, this ending feels much more apt to the contemporary problem, or rather the approach to the contemporary solution. There is a pervading realism to all the problems we find ourselves in. There's a strong sentiment that if we ignore them, they'll go away. This, for me, is the walk into darkness. We're not fighting to keep the fire alive. Instead, we're content to sit by and watch it go out, wondering what will become of the world. It's neither a propagation of the status quo, nor any sort of rebellion against it. It's just kind of a nihilistic acceptance that everything's going to fall apart. There's another way of reading this relationship, where the igniting of the first flame, like I said, is keeping of the status quo, and instead the only real change will come by walking into the shadow. And there's evidence to suggest that this is the case. This is at least what you're told by the serpent who tries to get you down this path in the game. But for me, Dark Souls is far too cynical for that. It's too cynical to offer any real solution, in the same way that our modern world hasn't offered us a real one. So instead, there are two non-answers. Whichever way you pick, it's violence and pain and death. Francis Bacon is one of my favorite artists ever. His works manage to capture the exact feeling of accepting violence and horror we see in our little turtle. His paintings are horrifying, violent, unsettling, but there's something so calm in each of them. As if all the horror of the world has been brought to a standstill, and now we can hope things, one day, might be all right. His best piece has to be Study After Velasquez's Pope Innocent X. If the title sounds like a mouthful, it's because it gives you everything you need to understand. Diego Velázquez was a Spanish painter nestled somewhere in the Baroque period. Like most painters of the time, his work was characterized by religious pieces and portraits, with the most famous of which being his rendering of Pope Innocent X. Bacon plays on this by remixing the portrait in his own style, taking the clear picture of a man sitting still and transforming it into a grotesque monster stripped away of humanity by lacerated breaststrokes. It's terrifying. It shows how close we are from losing ourselves, and in an age where we all are, the profiles we create, it's frightening thought how fragile we really are. This is an existential piece. Bacon's takedown of Velázquez, no matter how well-intentioned it may be, is not only the disillusion of a person, but of art as well.
It's a demonstration of how fragile each individual part of human society really is, each one of Deleuze's machines. That we've learnt to mask the barbarism under an aesthetic sheen, but it's there nonetheless. It'll be there till the bitter end, till the apocalypse. We will keep on this mask until...
Toss the Turtle strips this veneer away. That's what separates it from other titles in the genre. It's not afraid to show the Revelation-style apocalypse unfolding, unafraid to show the violence and the horror at the root of this existential monotony. It's a haunting reminder of what lies waiting for us only centuries, decades, or mere years away. It's a reminder, whether intentional or not, to acknowledge the Sisyphusian task at hand and to actively fight against it. To not end up as a turtle shot from a cannon, living a continued tortured existence. To not end up like the characters of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Instead, we need to find something better. We need to drop the boulder, the rock, to wander into the dark in an optimistic reading and emerge changed and with new knowledge, like Zoroaster coming out of the cave to give his great sermons of wisdom. But perhaps we're not strong enough. Not strong enough yet. Whenever things get hopeless, whenever your actions seem detached and the world seems too heavy and you just want to give up, for now, and only for now, remember this. We must imagine the turtle happy. Sisyphus.
Except for giving pain away.